Today's deck tech is just oozing with potential. If assembling a mana machine, drawing a ton of cards, and storming off to a win sounds like your idea of fun, then it's time to ask the pod, ooze your daddy. Aeve Progenitor Ooze is the leader of this deck, and much like a child playing with ooze, it only takes a second of taking your eyes off them before it's everywhere. Aeve Progenitor Ooze is a 5 mana, 2 generic, 3 green, 2/2 legendary creature ooze that says Storm, which for the uninitiated means when you cast this spell, copy it for each spell cast before it this turn. Copies become tokens. Aeve Progenitor Ooze isn't legendary if it's a token, and Aeve enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it for each other ooze you control. Many Magic the Gathering players have probably seen Krim, aka the Asian Avenger, pilot the deck to a win on the recent Shuffle Up and Play. While this deck doesn't have the budget for Nykthos, we can definitely do something similar, starting with our creatures. Arbor Elf, Llanowar Elves, Quirion Ranger may have us returning a land to our hand, but untapping a creature can lead to producing even more mana. Rustvine Cultivator takes some time to really get going, but even one land untap can change the turn we go off. Crashing Drawbridge is one of our haste enablers. Duskwatch Recruiter to help get stuff into our hand, which can be used for a bunch of different stuff, either in continuing storm lines or just to have something to play. Elvish Visionary is a draw spell, but also synergizes with some other things that we will cover in Enchantments. Scribe Ranger again lets us untap a creature for returning a land. Voyaging Satyr, another land untapper. Findhorn Brownie makes us pay 3, but we can untap a creature that can untap a land or untap a creature that taps for more mana. Greenweaver Druid. Krosan Restorer untaps a single land, but if we can activate the threshold, it will untap 3. Llanowar Tribe, Llanowar Visionary, Armorcraft Judge for card draw. Brawn. We can make creatures big, but if they can chump block us, then it's all for nothing. Chameleon Colossus can be a game ender. If our opponents aren't careful, only 3 activations and this can start sending players who don't block to the Shadow Realm.
I think you're talking about hell.
No, it's the Shadow Realm.
Karametra's Acolyte is one of the best cards in the deck. If you can untap her even once or twice, you've probably generated more than enough mana to close out the game. Nantuko Cultivator can trade dead lands in our hand for gas.
Even trade, baby.
Stoneseater Hierophant can untap lands multiple times a turn if we're lucky. Temur Sabertooth is one of the other ways we can storm off. Once we've generated a ludicrous amount of mana, we can start bouncing, then recasting our commander to grow our ooze army. Timeless Witness lets us get anything important back that we may need to cast again, and it has Internalized to get one more chance at bringing it back. Ulvenwald Oddity is the cryptid that won't quit. Once we get this unstoppable monster flipped to its haste enabling side, the game should be over. Primordial Sage gives the deck a little card draw for our creatures, which is why it's important to be able to find them. Lastly, Wakeroot Elemental can generate infinite mana, if we have the right setup. For just 5 mana, we can untap target land we control to turn it into a creature. But you can just do this to your heart's content, so if you have a land that taps for over 5 mana, we can generate infinite mana, the first step to storming off. Our sorceries help feed us gas to keep the storm rolling or to get out pieces to storm with. Abundant Harvest will get us either a land or a non-land card, depending on what we need. Hurricane is another way we can end the game. Just remember it deals damage to you too, so either prepare for a draw or you're going to need to be ahead on life. Insist makes our commander uncounterable and draws us a card. Metamorphosis lets us sack a creature to add 1 mana plus 1 equal to the spell's converted mana cost, basically netting us 1 mana when we sacrifice something. Explore draws us a card and lets us get an additional land drop. Rampant Growth. Regrowth will return something critical we need, but don't be scared to just fire it off to grab something to increase a storm count. Harmonized, the standard of green card draw for years. Shamanic Revelation for card draw and possible life gain. Collective Unconscious, more card draw. And Mouth/Feed, again, is even more card draw, but also comes with the benefit of giving us a blocker or casting it from the graveyard. In response, let's go to our instants, which are packed with cantrips or ways to storm off with infinite mana. Charge Through will give a creature trample and draw us a card. Elvish Fury has buyback, so if you create infinite mana, you can cast this infinite times and then cast your commander for the blob level of oozes. Emerald Charm is a 1 mana modal spell that either lets us untap a permanent, and this is the mode you will choose most often, destroy target non-aura enchantment, or target creature loses flying until the end of turn. Savage Summoning can help us cast our commander or any other creature we need to stick by making it uncounterable, and it also gets a +1/+1 counter. Viridescent Wisp is another cantrip. Provoke, untap target creature an opponent controls and forces them to block, which can be used as an interesting form of removal, but it's also just a way to add an additional storm count and draw us a card. Sprout Swarm also has buyback, much like Elvish Fury. If you have infinite mana, that means infinite storm, or if you just want to get a couple saprolings, you can just cast it a couple times just to build up a storm count. Weather the Storm is another storm card, but it gains us 3 life, which helps get us out of range of a hurricane taking us out. Early Harvest lets us untap all our basic lands, including the land we are going to make into our own little Nykthos. Inspiring Call will draw us a card for each creature with counters on it, but also doubles as some built-in protection from your opponent's board wipes. Lastly, Once in Future will get us 2 things back to our hands before exiling itself. We only play 3 artifacts, and it's also where one of our biggest enablers are. Helm of Awakening may discount all spells, even our opponents, but we are going to get way more mileage out of it. Malachite Talisman is one of the best cards in this deck. By weaving spells and then untapping permanents for 3 mana, you could potentially generate infinite mana with a buyback spell or Temur Sabertooth plus Aeve. Lastly, Lifecrafter's Bestiary. For the small payment of 1 extra mana when we cast a creature spell, we can draw a card. It also gives us a scry ability on our upkeep, so even more upsides. Enchantments are where the deck starts building that Nykthos we talked about. Wild Growth will let us add a green whenever we tap the enchanted land. Evolutionary Leap helps sack our commander so we can cast them again, as well as get us other creature cards into our hand. Fertile Ground adds an additional mana when we tap the enchanted land. Wolf Willow Hollow again adds an additional green when we tap the enchanted land. Elvish Guidance is a house. This can help our enchanted land tap for upwards of 5 mana all by itself if our board is set up. Enchantress Presence. If we are playing all these enchantments, we might as well draw cards for playing them. Find the Path gives us the initiative, and while it won't add an additional mana when we tap the land, it lets the land tap for 2 green instead of 1. Overgrowth does let us add 2 additional green mana when we tap the enchanted land. Burnet Haven is a little life gain as well as adds mana. Dawn's Reflection adds 2 mana when the land is tapped. Leyline of Abundance can boost our mana dorks as well as turn infinite mana into infinite power, helping us hopefully close out the game, even with minimal creatures. And lastly, Market Festival will let us also tap for an additional 2 mana. We have 1 Planeswalker in Vivian on the Hunt to give us a Birthing Pot effect for +2 loyalty, or the +1 ability lets us go fishing for more creatures, and she also has a minus ability to put a 4/4 Rhino into play. Lands? Just 36 forests, nothing fancy. We want lands that come in untapped because we want every turn to count. This deck is packed with combos. While almost all roads that lead to victory play out the same with a haste enabler and lots of ooze, or a massive amount of life gain before casting Hurricane executes the highest opponent's life total, that doesn't mean the road to get there isn't fun. Starting with one of the basics. Once you have adequately enchanted up a land that taps for 6 mana or more, Wakeroot Elemental lets us untap the land, turning it into a creature, which will let us tap it again, and targeting the same land, netting us 1 mana each time for infinite. Also, another subtle synergy we have is when you animate the land and start tapping it for mana, if you have Leyline of Abundance out, you add an additional mana because you're now tapping a creature for mana. Another combo we have is Karametra's Acolyte, Malachite Talisman, and one of our buyback spells. Once you are able to tap the Acolyte for upwards of 8 mana, sounds like a lot, but even with 2 copies of your commander, you basically got it. You can tap the Acolyte for mana, cast the spell with buyback, then pay 3 mana with the Talisman to untap the Acolyte, and do this to your heart's content, then cast your commander with whatever storm count you want, or with Elvish Fury and a card with Trample or Brawn in the graveyard, you make something huge and trample over. Or you have a haste enabler such as Crashing Drawbridge or Ulvenwald Oddity Flip, then make infinite saprolings with Sprout Swarm and consume your opponents with an army of plants.
Does it have to be human?
This combo can also be achieved with Temur Sabertooth bouncing a creature, then replaying it to get the green spell cast trigger so you can untap the Acolyte. Another combo would be Temur Sabertooth, flipped Ulvenwald Oddity, and either a land untapper when a land can tap for 5 mana or more, or have the Karametra's Acolyte out. This will allow you to tap the land or the Acolyte for the mana, bounce the creature back to your hand with the Sabertooth, play the creature again, either going net neutral or positive, ending the combo with casting your commander with a huge storm count, then swinging in for the victory. There are more combos in the deck, but play it yourself to find them. At time of recording, this pile of Ooze could be yours for under $22, which is about $16 less, depending on where you're looking, than a Nykthos Shrine to Nyx. But if you like the deck and want to upgrade it, Growing Rites of Itlimoc is an easy condition to meet. Once you've flipped it, you can easily translate a few untaps with it into a victory. Plus, with its recent reprint in Lost Caverns, now it's a great time to snag a copy. Nissa Vital Force has a great ultimate and a great plus ability, essentially getting us a free untap on the turn after we cast her, or use her to net even more card draw for playing our lands. Circle of Dreams Druid is a mana dork that's probably the closest to competing with Karametra's Acolyte, and could really pop off on those storm turns, especially with Sprout Swarm. Mana Reflections to help double the mana we produce, and Virtue of Strength lets us tap basics for 3 times as much mana, which all we play are basics. Lastly, we want some card draw to make sure we churn through the deck and pop off sooner. Garruk's Uprising also gives us Trample, which is a nice bonus, Return of the Wild Speaker, Life's Legacy, Momentous Fall, and Soul's Majesty. Also, let's include Deserted Temple as another way to untap target land for just 1 mana. Now, if you really want to punch up the budget, Nykthos Shrine to Nyx, Crop Rotation, and Glimpse of Nature are all great includes. I know Crop Rotation is cheap right now, but there's no real reason to run it unless you put in Nykthos. Moving right into cards to cut, Rustvine Cultivator is great as a budget body that untaps lands, but you gotta do some work to get enough out of it, so I'd cut it. Findhorn Brownie is okay, but you have to pay 3 to untap a creature, which at the time, it's just not good. I'd cut it. Brawn is good, but sometimes it's in your hand with no way to get it into your graveyard, so I'd cut it for anything that might grant us trample. Savage Summoning is good, but I'd rather have more card draw. Charge Through is a great cantrip, but again, I'd rather be drawing more cards than just 1. Provoke may be a good tool for removal, but again, I'd rather have better card draw or mana production. Helm of Awakening is good, but I don't like giving our opponents any advantage like that, so if you do cut this, I recommend Emerald Medallion for the discount. Well, that's been the deck with some upgrades and cards to cut. Be sure to tell me your favorite card from the deck or a card you would add. Also, be sure to tell me a commander you would like to see built on a budget. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe as it goes a long way to helping out the channel, and I appreciate it greatly. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.